Good morning, everyone. I would like to talk to you today about the subject of manners and why indeed they matter. I want to begin my talk with a quote from Emily Post. Manners are a sensitive awareness of the feelings of others. If you have that awareness, then you have good manners, no matter what fork you use. My wife and I are trying to get our teenage sons to embrace that fork thing, but it seems to be slow work in progress. My name is Brian Baker, and as a child of two educators, my mother, a 25-year elementary school teacher, and my father, also a teacher, a principal, and an educational researcher for over 40 years. Being raised to do the right thing or to do things the right way was part of my daily upbringing. For example, if my brother and I were to receive a gift from someone and we were a little tardy in our response, my parents would interject with, "Well, what do you say?" Or if we asked a question in an inappropriate manner, then they would say, "Well, how do you ask?" Or it was, "Sit up straight at the table and take your hat off in the house." As a matter of fact, I was at my mother's recently, and as I walked in the door, she told me to wash my hands before going into the refrigerator. And I was like, "Really, Mom? I'm almost 50 years old now. I think I know how to wash my hands." I've had to remind my mother oftentimes in my life that I'm not one of her first or second graders from yesteryear, but I have to remember that my mom is just old school, as was my grandmother, who was very fond of saying, "Boy, you need to mind your manners." So it's those old school lessons and those old school teachings that I've carried throughout my life. And even though we're in a new school world now, as my 16-year-old son Justin often reminds me, and as we're transforming as a company to the year 2020, and technology is improving by leaps and bounds daily, and we're connecting people's worlds 24/7. I think we need to recapture some of that old school that seems to have gotten lost in our new school world. Things like manners and courtesy and respect. Words like please and thank you, you're welcome. Gestures like a simple handshake or a holding of the door for someone, a fist bump, or just letting somebody in traffic as we sit in gridlock. My talk today is to incorporate or reintroduce civility and manners and respect into our daily lives, into our work lives. See, before there can be transformation of anything, there has to be transition. So let's make sure that we include small things that make a big difference in our transition. If we were to take away an average of 4 weeks of vacation during the year, then that would mean that we're still spending about 1,900 hours a year working with each other and interacting with each other, basically living with each other. That's a lot of time. We should learn how to insert politeness and courtesy into our daily diets the same way we do coffee and muffins, and then it becomes a little bit easier to digest those things. Because manners really do matter. And I think that we need to recapture the lost art of civility. With that, I want to just share a survey with you on civility in America. The first slide you see talks about the average number of times that Americans encounter incivility in a week. It's 17.1. Now, about half of that is online, which we spend a lot of time on the computers and on our devices. And then half of it is offline or just real life. But that's about 2.5 times a day that people are experiencing that with this survey. The second slide has a lot of information in it, and I'm only going to talk on a couple of things. 95% of the people surveyed believe that we have a civility problem in America. 70% of the people surveyed believe that the internet encourages uncivil behavior. And 70% also think that incivility has risen to crisis levels in our country. Those are alarming trends. And those are the things that I want us to be mindful of, that we don't take with us as we're moving forward in the year 2020. We all have serious jobs that need to be done at the company. We need to make sure that the company is thriving. Targets need to be achieved and exceeded. Budgets need to be met and goals need to be attained. This is our living. We depend on the company to do well, and our families depend on our company to do well. We also need to make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do for our customers. They depend on us. And when I say customers, I mean both internal and external. I'm an avid reader of customer service issues, and I came across an article not too long ago of a man who owns a very successful pub. And he talked about how there's a difference between customers and guests. He said that customers denotes a cash transaction, an exchange of money for goods and services, whereas a guest is someone that you invite into your space. He also said that at the end of the day, we don't serve drinks, we serve people. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. What if we began to think of each other as guests? How cool would that be? I'm sure that we would be willing to help each other a little bit more if we thought of each other as their guests. Now, I've been with a company for 17 years now, the vast majority of that time in sales. And that's where manners really do matter. That's where if you can gain the trust of someone and they like you, they'll buy from you. They'll also become willing to recommend customers, which is something that we all need. But during that time, I've always found that the hardest sell is not the external sale, it's the internal sale. It's getting somebody in the company to assist you when you need to make that customer whole. After all, they are the ones that pay our salaries at the end of the day. That's how the company can afford to keep us on. So I actually live the life of I can help you with that every day. I speak to customers all of the time, but I can only help people with that if I can get the help that I need internally to make sure things get done. Now, we can respond negatively if someone responds to us negatively. That's a choice we have to make. Who has time for that? Life is stressful enough as it is already, so sometimes you just got to make the choice to be above it and exhibit the things that are right in the world. That's why I'm a big believer in the power of words. That's why manners matter. That's why courtesy matters, and that's why respect matters. Those are the things that I use in order to get the help that we need. Words play a powerful role in all of our lives, both positive and negative. We know they can cut real deep if they're used in a nasty way, but they can also open a lot of doors, and they close doors too. It says what we say matters, and how we say it matters. I contend conducting yourself with civility and respect advances your message much more effectively and gets you the desired income that you're looking for. So as we transition to the year 2020, let us not forget the small things that make a big difference. And with that being said, I just have a few questions for everybody that's here in the audience and everybody that's looking on the broadcast. And these are questions that you could probably answer right away, but it would really be cool if you would just let them marinate for a couple of hours or maybe even just a couple of days. First question is, how often is it that you say thank you to someone when you get help at work? Is the word please part of your daily vocabulary? Are you even cognizant or aware of your tone? Is it respectful? Or does it tend to be dismissive or indifferent? None of us is perfect, and nobody's expected to be perfect, but we can make a concerted effort to treat each other in the way that we desire to be treated, or the way that our families desire to be treated, or the way that we desire for our families to be treated. After all, our internal interactions are going to mirror our external interactions. Rudeness begets rudeness, but the good news is kindness begets kindness. It's up to us how we're perceived internally and externally. And as we move towards 2020, let's set a tone that fosters a positive environment for all of us to work in. Now, as I wind down my talk, I want to share with you something that's very personal. It's a transformational moment in my life. And so I'd ask you to bear with me because it's not very easy for me to do this. But in February of 2008, February 11th to be exact, I had just gotten to work and getting ready for a 9 o'clock conference call that we had every week. My phone rang about 8:55 that morning, and it was a friend of my father's on the line. And he sounded very alarmed and very upset, and he shared with me that my father had passed away in his sleep that night. So if we fast forward 1 year to February of 2009, 1 year to the day exactly of my father's memorial service, my only brother passed away. So in the span of 375 days, my life had been turned upside down, not once, but twice. I was really lost. I didn't know really what to do. I didn't know what the purpose of life really was. The two men who I most admired and who I most loved and who were my role models were gone. So as I went through my grieving process and I began to think about their memorial services, it cheered me up a little bit. There were similar themes to both of their services. My father's service was overflowing with people. And I mentioned to you he was an educator. And so there were students and teachers and his colleagues and just a ton of people in attendance. Many people that day came to me and my wife and to my brother and my sister-in-law, and they talked about how my father had really changed their lives and made them feel important, that they could do anything. And I can't tell you how many people said that my father was their best friend. And we chuckled about that a little bit later because we knew my father's close circle of friends. We knew who his best friends were. But it said a lot about my dad that so many people came to us and said, your father was my best friend. It said a lot about him that he could make people feel like he was their best friend. At my brother's memorial service, the theme was the same. He was in the real estate business. And so there were a lot of clients of his that were there and colleagues of his, and his fraternity brothers came out about 50 or 60 strong. And person after person spoke of how my brother Mark positively impacted their lives. Just through the small gestures that he did, or his infectious laugh or smile, or his kindness. He was really a cool dude. A couple of weeks before he passed away, we had actually had a conversation just about life in general and people in general. And he did a lot of things for a lot of people. And he told me during that conversation that, I don't do things for people in order to get something in return. I always do things for people because it's the right thing to do. And so I began to realize that part of the purpose for me, for the rest of the time that I have on this earth, is to try to impact people in a positive way. It doesn't have to be the big things that do that. It could be the little things that do that on a daily basis. So I have a challenge for all of us. If there's someone in the company who helps you on a regular basis or has helped you recently, my challenge is to you that you just take a small space of time and just let them know how much you really appreciated their help. Now, it could be picking up the telephone or sending them an email. If you want to do it the old school way, you can handwrite a note. But the purpose is to just let somebody know how much you appreciate what you've done or what they've done for you. If this scenario doesn't fit your job, then I just ask you to speak to someone in the office that you barely talk to or hardly ever talk to. It's nothing big. It's just a simple good morning or a good afternoon. How's your day going? How was your weekend? We never know what that kind word could do for that person. They may be struggling just to get through the day, and that might be the thing that helps them do that. The fact of the matter is that a lot of people, and we may not know this, but they feel invisible, disposable. If you don't have the occasion in your position at the company to have that type of interaction, then my challenge to you is to do it outside of the job. Family members, spouse, mother, father, sister, brother, son or daughter, even a stranger. It's just the little things that matter, folks. I think it's only fitting that I end my talk today with a quote, since I began it with one. And this one is from Dr. Martin Luther King. He says, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And so I hope after my talk today, you begin to ask yourself that question. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say. I thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.